To continue our exploration of dodge and burn in the retouching series, today we'll use this technique to globally enhance our image in Adobe Photoshop. Here's a look at what lies ahead in the tutorial. It's a simple push to the 3 dimensions of the image itself, calling them out, helping us drive focus to those dimensions of the highlights and shadows, and really letting depth come back through. You can give it just the faintest little hint of that little white line. And again, like line art, in the darkness, it's helping us to see that her jaw extends out and goes past that area. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I'm David Bird with Reality Reimagined. I'm an award-winning photographer and Photoshop artist that specializes in fantasy composite art. Photography is a 2-dimensional medium of a 3-dimensional world, and it's vital that we find ways to call back to that depth. During the retouch of an image in Photoshop, we can use dodge and burn to bring back the depth in the image, sculpt the subject with light and shadow, and much more. Let's look at the overview of today's tutorial. We'll start with the global dodge and burn using curves adjustment layers. Our goal is to enhance the existing highlight and shadow of the image, fine-tuning the look to the portrait and the lighting pattern of the photography. Then we'll conclude the tutorial with using a special element of dodge and burn to give the image an illustrative artistic enhancement. You can reference the time color code below to move through the tutorial at your own pace. Before we dive into Photoshop, you can help me reach the goal of earning 1,000 subscribers for this channel on YouTube. If you like the content you find today, please give the video a like, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel. New content debuts each week covering education and photography in Photoshop, and when you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell icon so you'll be shown that new content when you return to YouTube. Thank you so much for your support, and now let's bring the photo to the shops. I liked that one. Come on, photo to the shops. That's to get started with the global dodge and burn, we're going to use 4 different curves adjustment layers to create both the global effect and then the more artistic refinement at the end. So each one of these is going to be representing one's for burn, one's for dodge. The other 2 are for the artistic effect, and we'll explain them when we get to it. But we need to set up the different curves so that they're ready to go for these effects of dodging and burning. So starting with the burn curves adjustment layer, I'm going to click the icon of the actual curve, which will bring up the properties window that you see here. I'm going to make an anchor point in the middle, and I'm going to bring it down just a little bit to make things just slightly darker. This is meant to be a global burn, so we just want a little bit of shadow. Then I'm going to come to the icon of the layer mask, and I'm going to hit Control or Command and the letter I to invert the mask. This turns it into a hide all mask so that we can now paint white onto this mask to begin to reveal the effect of the curves adjustment layer. I'm going to come up to the dodge curves adjustment layer, click on the actual icon itself, and then make an anchor point in the center and just increase the overall brightness of the image just a little bit. Click the icon of the layer mask, Control or Command and letter I to invert. Then I'm going to come to the curves adjustment layer that's for darks, essentially for the illustrative effect, the artistic effect that we'll do in the second part of the tutorial. I'm going to make an anchor point, and this one I'm going to bring down pretty considerably because I want it to be very dark. Let's go down just a little bit further. Then click the actual icon layer mask, hit Control or Command I, and then we'll come to the 4th one for light, and we're going to blow this one out a lot, bringing the anchor point up and over just a little bit. Click the icon and then hit Control or Command and the letter I to invert. So this next part is up to you. I prefer to start with the burn curve and start putting in the shadows. It's somehow my eyes are better seeing the shadows within the image, and then I try to go through and create those corresponding highlights to the shadows. And as we talked about in the previous tutorial, the highlights and shadows essentially designate a sense of topography, or the 3-dimensional nature of the image itself. And so when you're putting in these shadows, it's a good idea to go through and try to match it with a corresponding highlight, as long as it makes sense within the image. So before I start painting though, what I need to do is to create one final adjustment layer, and that's a black and white adjustment layer. So I'm going to come to the adjustment layer window at the bottom of the layer stack and then come up to black and white. And then this one I want to put at the very top of the layer stack. This is a temporary effect that's turning the image black and white. And why? Because it's forcing us now to see white, black, and gray within the image. And as we talked about in the previous tutorial, White, black, and gray represent light values within Photoshop. White is for highlights, black is for the shadows, gray is for the midtones. When we are now forced to see the image this way, it helps us to begin to see the sense of three dimension within the image based upon light value. And that's what we're doing with dodging and burning. We're introducing artificial highlight and shadow into the image to sculpt that existing light, that existing shadow, therefore playing up the depth in the three dimensions within the image. So I'm going to start with the burn. I'm going to make sure that I'm on the layer mask itself. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, hit B for brush. And right now the opacity of my brush is set to 100% and the flow is set to 5%. And that's good. I want this to be minimal and I want to be able to build it up as I go. So I'm just going to start painting and looking at the existing shadows within the image itself. Now, as you get more familiar with Photoshop and with retouching, you'll kind of just know certain areas to go to start augmenting the existing shadows and really playing into that effect itself. It's not something that you have to sit here and completely analyze the image a lot before you make each brush stroke, because there will be just certain areas you want to start augmenting. I'm looking at specific edges within the image, and notice like I just went through and painted on her jawline, the shadowy area at the bottom of her lip, the actual shadow between her two lips, because I'm augmenting the existing shadows. Therefore, it will help the three dimension take place. So following the image around, I'm not going to speed up this part of the tutorial. I want you to see all of this because as I have done demonstrations of this in the past at conferences that I teach at, folks will come up and tell me like, gosh, I'll never be that fast. You're so amazing, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh yes, go on. No, I'm kidding. Like I constantly tell them it's not about skill. It's about just understanding your job right now is just to put down highlight and shadow, to not super analyze the image and not sit here and agonize over every brush stroke that you make. And oh, that's got to be really careful. I got to make my brush very small and gently paint in the burn. I don't want to go outside the line. This is a very simple process where, again, you can undo it at any point by moving the curve around just a little bit, moving those points around. You can increase it, you can lessen it. You can undo some of the mask by painting on it. You can lower the density of the mask. You can lower the opacity of the entire layer itself. This is why I like the curves adjustment method for dodging and burning, because there is so much control you have to lessen the effect or to increase it if needs be. Doing the gray layer itself is one that I've never cared for when I discovered the curves adjustment method. And I didn't invent the curves adjustment method. I learned about it many, many years ago. I've been retouching in Adobe Photoshop since Photoshop 4. And back then, as much as it pains me to say it now, I used to use the actual dodge and burn tools because I didn't know about the 50% gray layer. And then when I learned about the 50% gray layer, I did that. Then I learned about curves, and now that's what I do. This is why retouching is always ever evolving, and it's great and good to keep up on your knowledge and your skill sets. So I think the shadows overall look pretty good. I'm going to go on to the dodge now, and I'm just going to hit some of the same areas that I was in before. And I just want to augment these with the same corresponding highlights. And in this case for dodge, I'm probably going to introduce some new ones. Talking about the lighting pattern itself earlier, essentially we're dealing with a Rembrandt lighting pattern where the light's coming in from camera left and traveling across, and this telltale little triangle of light, that's the key to Rembrandt lighting. So I can augment that in this area by pushing the highlights up just a little bit by dodging this area, but it is always a good idea on any human face to dodge certain key areas, like the areas of the cheekbones right below the eyes, and then the area of the eyebrow ridge here and here, where you can augment those and make those just a little bit brighter. The tip of the nose, the lips, the area of the chin that gets more light and catches more light, and even the center of the forehead. Those are good areas to augment. When people put on makeup, they do the same thing to a degree. They'll use a darker tone of makeup to contour their cheek, and they'll leave a area here with the same base of makeup, or potentially make it just a little bit brighter. These help it to stand out and call into the sense of three dimension. But I don't want to necessarily paint a dodge into her in the middle of her forehead today, because this shadow is a part of the Rembrandt lighting pattern. So it's brighter on this side of her forehead, and as light travels across, it turns gray and then black. It gets darker. If I were to brighten up all of this, it would look like she has a strong highlight and then it just stops into a shadow. That's going to make it feel like her head has some weird, like, hard edge to it. So You don't necessarily need to paint in a dodge or a burn in all the corresponding areas that would be typical, especially if you're just doing a basic general retouch. It's something that is circumstantial. And dodging and burning will always be circumstantial to the image you're working on. It depends on so many different factors of what the lighting pattern is of the photography, what the person is wearing, their skin color, and so forth. There's all kinds of elements that come into play. But a key element that I want to stress to you is to not worry too much about what you're putting down. Just look at the light in the image and just start augmenting it. Since you're painting at a low flow and you have the ability to control the curve and so forth, just get the paint down, get the effect down, and then take a global look at it. No pun intended. Global dodge and burn. Get it? Global dodge and burn. Global look. Take a look at it and just decide, how much is too much. And then you can either add more or scale it back. When it comes to clothing or inanimate objects, buildings and things like that, I really love to do dodging and burning because there is so much you can do to the image to really help it stand out. So when I do clothing, I tend to increase the flow of my brush, and I've now increased it to 30%. And I'm just going to really hit these areas because it can help the individual texture and folds of the clothes stand out a little bit more and just give it that much more significance. I'm going to come back to the burn now, and I'm going to paint in just a little bit stronger shadow into those ripples and folds into the sweater. I don't necessarily want to pull the audience's focus so that they're going, oh, I don't want to look at her face. Look at that lovely sweater she's wearing, right? No, I don't want to do that. But ultimately, if I can augment that just a little bit more, then it just stands out a little bit more and therefore makes a much nicer image. So I'm going to hit Control Command on the number 0 to zoom all the way back out. Let's close the properties window here so we can see. I'm going to turn off the black and white adjustment layer, and let's do a before and after. So this is with the after of dodging and burning. Here's the before. It's a simple push to the 3 dimensions of the image itself. Calling them out, helping us drive focus to those dimensions of the highlights and shadows, and really letting depth come back through. I think the dodge is a little too strong. So again, I have a couple of choices. I can come to the layer mask itself. Let's take a look at the layer mask. I'm going to hit hold Alt, or Option, and click the layer mask. Everywhere where I've painted white, this looks like a Picasso painting, a Picasso in black and white. I'm going to hit hold Alt or Option, click the layer mask again to go back in the normal view. I'm going to hit B for brush, and I'm going to change my flow to 2% by hitting Shift 0 and 2. Then I'm going to switch my foreground color from white to black, and then start painting to simply undo what I painted onto this mask to reveal the dodge. But I'm only going to do it in the areas where I think it's too much, which is specifically right there on her cheek. It was just a tad too much. I got carried away with all that dodge. There we go. And just lessening it a little bit. Now doing the before and after. And let's go to the actual point of the dodge, and let's just bring it down just ever so slightly. Yeah, I think that really helped. Yep. It's just, now it's a soft transition of highlight and shadow, artificial highlight and shadow, so that the existing highlight and shadow doesn't feel like it's augmented. It just feels natural. So let's look at, I think the burn is okay. I'm going to come to the burn curve, and I'm just going to bring the point back up to center just a little bit more, just to feather it out and lessen the overall effect before and after. Good. I really like the look. It's Control Command on the number 0 to zoom all the way back out. One final global look at the image. Yeah, everything's standing out. It's contouring her. Everything feels good. I like the smoothness of it. So let's move into the second and final part of this tutorial, which is to use the other 2 curves adjustment layers to do a very stylized dodge and burn. So with them being very bright and dark, essentially what I'm going to do is use these 2 curves adjustment layers like a cartoonist would or a line artist would do. So when somebody draws a picture, and it's going to, let's say for a comic book, right? They're going to draw it in pencil to sketch it out. It's going to have a lot of rough lines and drag marks and sketch marks and eraser and whatever else. Somebody's going to go in and do line art, which means they're using ink and essentially tracing the line shape of the entire thing, so that you have clear defined lines that designate, here's the jaw line, this would be a line art. The pencil, you would see a bunch of hash marks and penciling and shading. They're going to do one black line that designates the overall outlined pattern of the image that they're drawing. I try to do the same thing with these two curves adjustment methods, the light and the dark, where they're really bright and really dark. And I look at the image, and this is very, very circumstantial, because some images lean well into it and some do not. So I'm going to hit B for brush. Let's just start painting it, and you'll kind of see the effect as we go. I'm going to change the flow of my brush to 5%, not 54%, by hitting Shift 0 and 5. And now I'm going to start painting white onto this mask to begin to reveal all of this. So key areas that I want to start with, again, I'm thinking about it from line art. So an outline. So if there were a black line that went all the way around her lips like this, that would you would see that symbol, that shape, and go, oh, those are lips, because we intuitively understand that if that curve starts here and comes up and hits a point and comes down, meets another point and curves down and then finishes it, we know what that is without needing to see the colors inside or anything else. So I'm going to look at the existing whites that I see, and I'm just now going to make them significantly brighter with that highlight layer. There's an area right through here that's just a little bit brighter, so I can augment that. Same thing up here. And then this spot on her chin, I can just simply make my brush as big as I want this highlight spot to be, and I'm just tapping a couple of times with my Wacom Intuos Pro pen that's making just soft little circles there into that area. I can do the same thing up here on the nose and just give it a little bit of a brush to really intensify that one key hot spot. And then I'm going to come to this area below her nose. Somebody told me in a previous video what this is, because I asked to put it in the comments below, and I've already forgotten what it is. Somebody said Cupid's something or whatever, and then somebody else said some like technical medical term, and I can never remember what it is. Anyway, so we can call those out just a little bit. And then like over here on this part of her jawline, we can give it just the faintest little hint of that little white line. And again, like line art, in the darkness, it's helping us to see that her jaw extends out and goes past that area. And let's skip over to the dark area and do the same thing. We can do it in the natural, again, thinking about line art, and the natural curves of her nostril through here, and just make it just a little bit darker. Right through here at the base of her nose, we can create a little bit of a line, again, thinking about it from a perspective of line art, like a traditional artist would. I'm making the brush just a little bit bigger. I'm going to rotate my screen because I paint better left to right. So hitting the letter R and then rotating the screen and then letting go of the letter R usually reverts back to the tool you were using. Sometimes it won't, so you'll have to hit like B for brush to go back to the brush itself. Now I'm just going to paint in a couple of little strokes like that, hit some of these areas in her eye, make them just a little bit darker. And again, I'm not making a big brush and painting a whole bunch of shadow into the scene. I'm just looking at it from a perspective of line art. Those areas of, those curves are so intense and so powerful that if we just simply paint in a few of these all over the image, they'll begin to build up and it takes on that effect. And, you know, again, like in some cases, retouching, people may remove these wrinkles within her skin, below her eye. I don't do that. I don't go to that extreme, because when you look at an image that's been retouched too much, yes, you can appreciate all the amazing retouching technique of the person who did it. And I look at the images, I'm the worst person to go grocery shopping with, because I'll look at the magazines in the magazine aisle and I'm like, puh, puh, and they must think I'm being critical of the articles that I'm reading. And I'm looking at the pictures and being like, yep, you certainly know how to retouch. Good for you, because you can just go too far. And it has its place, I know, but it's just something that I don't like. So, all right, cool. We've added in some of these darker lines, and then we can add in one down here. And again, the idea is just to think about it like it's a perspective of line art. And these are just small little augments to the image. From this view, can you see it as much? I can see it just a little bit. And as we zoom in, we start to see this stylized effect. And let's again take a look at just these two. So I'm going to put them into a group so we can do the before and after. This is with the stylization, looking at her lips, her nose, her jaw, and so forth, and without. It's just a subtle little stylization technique. And again, same idea. We can come back to the curves. We can lessen the curve if we want to. If it's too strong, we can paint on the mask and start painting it away. And to undo it itself, we can just lower the overall opacity of the entire layer itself. I'm going to take it down to like 73, sounds good. Take the other one down just a little bit. And again, just globally reducing it just a little bit, but they're there. And the line art perspective, I would not do on an image that was an extreme close-up of the face, because you'll just be able to see the lines. But from this view, from back here, it's just a subtle little hint, but I can see them even from this view, and hopefully you can see them in the video below. So let's go ahead and finish up the tutorial with some final thoughts and complete our journey today. Dodging and burning is the second most crucial step in the retouching process, in my opinion. As I talked about in the first video, part 1 of the dodging and burning parts of this retouching series, I talked about how when you're dealing with skin texture and so forth, that's a challenge. People can use dodging and burning for that. I use frequency separation. To me, frequency separation is the first step in creatively retouching an image. And I do professional retouching and I get paid for it, but my clients are judging my work. They're not judging saying, well, do you use a pure method or this? Because I need to know, because that somehow makes it better for me to spend money on that. They like the quality of work of what I produce. I like the artwork that I produce. And my recommendation is to use the techniques that you can flow through the best, that give you the best artwork and the best look, because you're the artist. It's up to you. When I do retouching, I have an action that I've created that populates all the different layers for frequency separation, dodging and burning, and the layers to enhance the eyes. And I do them all together at once, sometimes independently, and then I will bounce back and forth in between. A little bit of an adjustment to the skin texture during the frequency separation process. Then I'll bounce up to the dodge and burn and use dodge and burn locally to clean up some of the texture. As I'm working with the eyes, enhancing them, I will also use the layers for dodging and burning to do a little fine-tuned tweak into the light and the dark of the eyes, and potentially go back down to frequency separation and enhance the details, remove certain details and textures. Retouching is not, in my opinion, a singular process of A, B, it leads to B, leads to C. It is one continuous circle of artistic artwork. Find the methods that work best for you. And as I say when I teach in other videos on this channel, you have to practice. You have to practice all the time. If you can commit to sitting down 2 to 3 times a week for 1 hour and just practice frequency separation for that week, do it for 2 or 3 weeks in a row, and then just practice dodging and burning within a relatively short amount of time, you'll become so familiar with these techniques that you'll be able to move through it quickly and expand your education even more learning these different steps. So thank you for watching this video. If again you like the content of the video, please give the video a like. Check out the other videos in the retouching series or the other content on this channel, and please consider subscribing to it. Our journey is now at an end, so until next time, I'll see you out there in the world of Photoshop.